Hello and welcome to the third finance webinar in our series. Just to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand after this event. In our first webinar, we discussed finance as the catalyst of change, transforming the finance function to align more closely with the overall company strategy and introducing high levels of automation, switching from spending the majority of the time running the business to spending the majority of the time forward-looking and steering the business. In our second finance webinar, we detailed the perfect close process, illustrating the different areas of finance working together on a single platform in joined-up end-to-end automated process flows. Today's session is all about modernising finance and how to realise fast transformation and plan the journey to a 360-degree view of finance. I'd like to start by introducing the team. I'm Christiane Perry, a finance expert at SAP within the Centre of Excellence for Finance and Risk, and I cover the EMEA North region. I have a finance background and I help customers understand how technology can address their finance and reporting challenges. Paul Harris. Paul has been with SAP for 13 years, working with customers in oil and gas and the transportation and service industries. He engages with senior customer executives to discuss how they adopt new technology to transform the way that they run their operations. And our special guest, Ritesh Bhushan. Ritesh leads Deloitte's S4HANA finance capability for the EMEA region, and he has over 18 years of SAP implementation and project management experience. He works with large global clients to improve their finance operations. In today's finance webinar, we'll recap the unique nature of S4HANA Intelligent Finance and then discuss how SAP have radically rethought the journey to finance transformation. I'll start by introducing SAP S4HANA Central Finance Solution Proposal, or what it is. And then next Paul will illustrate the benefits other customers are achieving, so why customers are doing it. Followed by Ritesh, who will share the Deloitte modern approach to projects, kinetic finance startup, using the latest technologies to deliver super fast implementation. So that will be how customers are doing it. And we're more than happy to take questions in the chat window as we go along. And we'll also share our contact details, and you're welcome to reach out to any of us after this webinar. Now, having spoken to many different organisations about finance transformation, what comes up again and again is the desire to simplify, standardise and innovate. Simplify, both in terms of the number of systems that staff have to deal with and the way that they use those systems. So with S4HANA, users have access to modern, intuitive screens that mirror the way we use systems in our private lives, like smartphones and iPads. Standardise. Here we refer to both the technology platform, with applications designed to work together, for example, general ledger and consolidation, and the end-to-end finance processes across the entire organisation. With S4HANA, the data platform contains all of the finance data in the same place. Innovate by using the latest technologies to change the way finance works. For example, with machine learning, where the system learns from the user in order to automate tasks while enhancing data quality and accuracy. Or the agility to innovate by introducing new business models, especially with the trend towards selling service and subscriptions rather than selling physical goods. Gaining transparency across the organisation is often a big driver for finance transformation. And for many organisations, it's so difficult to get the data from across the various parts of the business into a common format that by the time the data has eventually been collected and massaged into shape and the reports produced, that the information is already out of date. The design of S4HANA Finance has been completely rethought from how things used to work in traditional ERPs. The new concept is focused on the universal journal, our single source of truth. And this is where all kinds of transactions, whether they're accounts payable, accounts receivable, general ledger, fixed assets or cash movements, everything is captured into a single repository. And the full details of all the attributes and dimensions are retained with each transaction posting. And as there are no old-fashioned subledgers anymore, this means that there are no batch updates, no more ledger reconciliations required. Now all the data is available real-time, always up to date and reliable. And the unique character of the Universal Journal is that it also provides both transactional and analytical details from the single source. So whereas in the past it was necessary to extract all the transactional details and balances from the finance system and then upload them into analytical cubes or spreadsheet models in order to report and analyse the data, now we can do this in S4HANA. We can report and analyse real time from the Universal Journal where the data is always up to date with full traceability and has the transparency to drill down from the consolidated financial statements to the source data entries. And it's not just transparency that's important. Finance needs to create tangible insights from vast volumes of finance data, and trust in the data is a real imperative. But with the finance data flowing through a complex and ageing landscape of different applications, that often looks something like these examples where each of the different systems has a different data model with complicated integration and update protocols, there can be huge challenges to reconcile and verify the figures reported. And we know that reporting from this type of finance architecture is hugely difficult. It's expensive to maintain and it's slow. And where there is no easy audit of the figures, the result is often that it's difficult to trust the data being reported. Transformation is all about having easy access to view the entire organisation without having to wait, and with the ability to easily drill down and verify that accounting policy was applied and that postings are complete and correct. And the case for transformation is clear. The question now is how to plan that journey. Well, if your starting point is that you already have an SAP ECC system, then you can go through a system conversion, or what is sometimes referred to as a brownfield implementation. And this will give you a technical upgrade to the new environment, but there will be little in the way of innovation or transformation. Alternatively, if your starting point is either SAP or any other ERP, you could opt for a new implementation, which is sometimes referred to as a greenfield implementation. So starting afresh to take advantage of the standard best practices and all of the new S4HANA capabilities, but there will be substantial work required to reintegrate to your existing finance landscapes. And for both of these options, the project must be complete before you can cut over and start using the new S4HANA environment. But now, SAP can offer an alternative journey, a new S4HANA implementation with central finance, which gives a fresh perspective on what is achievable and in vastly accelerated timeframes. In this option, the new S4HANA with central finance is deployed alongside your existing finance architecture. This new approach first harmonises the organisational master data and creates a common or central finance platform. Then each transaction entered into the existing source systems is instantly replicated real-time directly into the S4HANA finance platform. So you get the benefit of up-to-the-minute view of your organisation, reconciled by design with no loss of detail or audit trail, along with all of the new concepts we've talked about. Easy to use modern technology, standard processes enabling automation and innovation. But crucially, you don't have to wait until your entire landscape is overhauled and migrated across to the new platform. You can do that over time, as and when it makes sense to you. Now, this is a radical change in the way projects can be delivered, enabling transformation where you can focus on your highest priorities and return on investment opportunities. So now I've covered what central finance is all about, I'd like to hand over to Paul, who will share why customers are implementing with central finance. So over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Chrissy. Let's continue our theme, planning the journey to S4HANA. I'll focus on the 3 points that Chrissy introduced: simplify, standardise, innovate. In this section of the presentation, we'll focus on a practical example using a customer case. Now, I've personally worked on several successful S4HANA implementations in the past, and I'm currently engaged with 4 other customers on the journey to S4HANA. But just one caveat, the practical customer example case that I'm about to use, for reasons of confidentiality, is a hypothetical hybrid of these customers with disguised numbers. And then later on in the presentation, I'll hand over to Ritesh of Deloitte, where he will refer to over 40 successful central finance implementations. So here is our customer case example. The CFO recently ran a benchmarking study which shows that her finance organisation costs as a percentage of revenue is over 2.5 times more than the best of her competitors. In all other respects, this is a very well run business, and the problem is that it's hampered by a complex IT landscape. So let's explore this in a little bit more detail. Okay, this is a very busy slide, and I make no apology for this. It illustrates the current complexity, the lack of standardization, and the difficulty in introducing innovations. We can summarize this complex diagram in 2 sections, A and B. So in section A, we've got 5 different ERP systems, that's 1 per division, with an array of supporting systems and customizations. Now, in fairness to this customer, these were inherited over the years by acquisition. And in section B, we've got a complex array of analytics, planning and reporting systems. In all these systems, historical data is uploaded in batch from the ERP systems, so the auditable connection to source data is lost. Furthermore, the quality of the data is compromised because, as Chrissy described earlier, it's out of date, and trust in the data is compromised due to the manual processing, massaging and reconciliation. And of course, the manually intensive, time-consuming processing contributes to the significant excess cost of finance in this company. So let's now look at a couple of options for achieving the CFO's objectives of reducing cost of finance to best in class, and why the central finance deployment approach significantly outperforms the traditional approach. But let's start with a very clear statement. The days where organisations are forced to carry out protracted multi-year projects with high risk of project failure and delays, budget overruns, and disruption to customer service during go-lives are gone. Seriously, there's just no need for this anymore. The problem with multi-year projects is that they're all about promises for the future. So project managers say, don't worry, spend all this money now, do all this work now, and a year's time, or maybe 18 months' time, you'll suddenly get some amazing transformation. Now, with central finance, the message is very different. It's much more immediate. It's more like, carry out this small project on a particular section or process in your business over the next 4 to 6 weeks. Then you'll be up and running with your new transformed way of working. The business will benefit from real value, and then you'll be highly motivated to start the next 4 to 6 weeks project. Now, in the next session, Ritesh will explain how the SAP partner Deloitte has implemented over 40 ERP transformations using central finance. And in total, SAP's got over 100 live implementations of central finance, including 80 in the global Fortune 500. Now, of course, our competitors are trying to catch up, but if you study their claims closely, you'll see that their efforts are currently very immature. Okay, so let's now look at the anatomy of a multi-year project using the customer case that I outlined at the start of this presentation, and discuss why this approach is no longer relevant. So if you recall, the customer example had 5 divisions with 5 different legacy ERPs and a whole raft of supporting legacy systems. And the CFO wants to enable the transformation of her finance organisation with a single modern ERP instance. She's ruled out a single global big bang due to the unacceptable risk of this approach. So this diagram illustrates the traditional journey to achieve finance transformation with a single ERP instance. Note that the project for each division is planned to take about a year, and then you get some business value for that particular division. And then the implementation team starts the project in the next division as they hand over testing and go live. And the whole journey for all of the divisions takes about 4 years. And of course, any delay to any of the divisional projects means that the whole project would leak into the 5th year. Now, I call this journey traditional, but unless you've got SAP Finance, Central Finance capability, there is currently no credible proven alternative, and you're stuck with this approach. Now, let's look at some of the characteristics of this approach. Okay, well, first of all, you can make a perfectly credible business case with good, not great, just good, return on investment and reduction in IT cost. But look at the downside. We've all read horror stories, no matter what ERP vendor, where projects have not been run well. We've heard about go-lives that have disrupted organisations' service to their customers. We've read about projects that run over time or over budget or even failed completely. And we've heard about multi-year projects where the organisation gets weary, employees move on with their careers during these protracted timescales, taking their experience of the project with them. So let's look at a much better journey. On the bottom half of this diagram, you can contrast the traditional approach with the central finance approach. And Chrissy explained how this works in the first part of this session, but let's look at this in the context of the customer example. And there are 2 important takeaways from this diagram. The first takeaway is that the whole central finance journey takes about half the time of the traditional journey. And in the next section of this presentation, Ritesh of Deloitte will explain how we can do this even faster with modern artificial intelligence implementation techniques. Now, remember that the end state for both journeys is the same. You get a full global deployment of S4HANA. Okay, the second takeaway is that the business value of the central finance journey is achieved much earlier, and you get a stream of small defined scope deliverables. This is represented on the diagram with little green diamonds. With the traditional approach on the top half of the diagram, you only get 5 big slugs of business value, and over a much longer time period. Let's look a little deeper at our customer example and the 3 steps in their central finance journey. Now, let's just remind ourselves of the 3 key themes that Chrissy outlined at the start of the presentation: simplify, standardize, and innovate. Now, as I said, step 1 is to connect up the legacy ERPs to the central finance platform. In this scenario, the first ERP will take about 5 months, and subsequent ones will take about a month each. So in our example company, we'll have the business value and the modern user experience of S4HANA embedded reporting rolling up by division from month 5 to month 10. And at month 10, the CFO will have complete global financial visibility. And this visibility, just to remind you, is in real time with full auditability right back to the source transactions. No need for clunky, expensive lift and shift of the data into separate analytics or planning tools. And also we've got real-time financial consolidation and global budgeting and planning. Now, let's look at the business value that this achieves. Firstly, let's remind ourselves of the complex IT landscape that I showed at the beginning of this section, the one that's dragging our customers into the lower quartile of financial performance. Now look, within 10 months, we have the radical simplification that allows the value of complete decommissioning of the vast array of these legacy systems. And we have more with a standardized single data platform. And we've got a business process platform ready for step 2. As discussed earlier, step 2 is to replace the legacy business processes with modern, innovative, intelligent processes. And at the same time, we further standardize our data, as we no longer need to use the data from the source system. Instead, the new S4HANA business processes generate their own clean standardized data in the S4HANA Central Finance instance. Let's have a look at this in a little bit more detail. As I mentioned earlier, we do this in a series of small incremental projects with defined scope. So at the end of phase 1, in addition to central reporting, we automatically get the S4HANA business process platform. And at this point, only the group consolidation and budgeting and planning business processes are active. And step 2 is to incrementally switch on the other S4HANA business processes. And the pace, the focus, and the priority is completely at the customer's discretion. So just as an example, as I said before, there are currently 5 teams for accounts receivable in the shared service centre. That's one for each legacy ERP. So with step 2, we could implement some intelligent S4HANA accounts receivable processes for one team, and then bring on board the other divisional teams within one shared service centre. And then we wind up with one efficient team for accounts receivable with all the associated business benefits. Now, obviously, the business process platform extends well out into the future, and SAP has a roadmap for future planned innovations for intelligence and hyper-automation. And as these are released, they too can be added. And then finally, step 3 is to decommission the old legacy ERPs. Let's conclude by looking at some of the key features of the business case, together with some example numbers. So looking at the business benefits first, these are greater for the central finance journey. And this is for the simple reason that business value is achieved earlier, giving a much faster return on investment. And secondly, surprisingly, the IT cost is actually similar for the two approaches. You might think that because there's an upfront IT investment in connecting up all the legacy systems, that might not be the case. But the speed of the central finance journey more than compensates for that, because the legacy systems with the central finance journey can be decommissioned more quickly than with the 4 to 5 year sequential Big Bang journey. And finally, there are the 3 qualitative parameters of risks and project durations, which are significantly favourable for the central finance journey. I'll now hand over to Ritesh of Deloitte, who will explain how Kinetic Finance Startup accelerates the central finance journey even faster than the examples that I've shown. Over to you, Ritesh.
Thanks, Paul, for explaining the SAP Central Finance Value Proposition and the breadth of use cases that can create a continuous value drop stream for finance function of any organization. Hello, my name is Ritesh Bhushan. I am the Deloitte EMEA SAP Finance Leader, and I am going to talk about how can you further accelerate on the value delivery of central finance using an innovative approach. We at Deloitte have delivered over 40 plus large central finance projects, and most of what I'm going to explain is based on the learnings derived out of such transformation experience. First of all, it is important to note that SAP Central Finance is no longer a conceptual or untested proposition, but rather a robust offering with many large customers already live and delivering benefits out of central finance. Key value drivers are single source of financial truth and generating new insights for business steering. We also observe customers are demanding generating this value much faster and with less business and IT resources. However, as central finance is a key transformation opportunity, there is also an expectation of how can the effort of business and IT resources be optimized. Deloitte recognized this need to innovate how central finance and digital transformation is delivered, and as a result, shaped a key innovation that I'm going to talk through in rest of this presentation. In our discussions with many large customers, it becomes evident that the velocity to value and sticking to standards are the two key principles for delivering value for finance. The speed of digital transformation varies across different sectors due to the factors driving the change. For some sectors, it drives operational efficiency, and for others, it is a matter of survival. However, it is clear that no one can afford to see the results at the end of the program. The other observation is that business capacity to support these transformations is limited. To address these challenges, Deloitte introduced Kinetic Finance Startup approach. Kinetic Finance Startup is an innovative solution that focuses on leveraging the power of machine learning and AI in delivering such central finance transformation projects up to 40% faster. How is this achieved? First, by being able to leverage existing data and harmonize it using industry standards, such that the starting point of discussion is not about the theoretical design but a real system with the real data that business users can iterate on and provide input on exceptions. This transformative approach allows faster decision making, a holistic design of the data model with limited or no regret decision, and also early user adoption and engagement, which is critical for the success of transformation. Secondly, with Kinetic Finance Startup, it's not about instant perfection. It's about accelerating as much of the upfront work as possible so you can realize the same amount of value months sooner. Basically, fail fast, fail early, iterate, accelerate to the end state. With Kinetic Finance Startup, even if the automated finance data and process model is only 50% directionally correct in the first pass, you are starting off your implementation 50% complete, leading to a significant time savings in the overall transformation journey. Let's now talk about what is exactly under the hood of Kinetic Finance Startup. As an integrated service plus solution offering, Kinetic Finance Startup leverages machine learning to do the fuzzy matching and then use robotic process automation to rapidly transform existing financial data and reporting landscape into a new central finance landscape. Kinetic Finance Startup lets the machine do the tedious work that is typically taken on by humans, work that can consume inordinate amount of effort and delay time to value. Kinetic Finance Startup enables self-configuring SAP Central Finance as the first step in finance transformation journey. The solution, which uses Amazon Web Service Glue, Lambda, and step functions, applies robotics and machine learning to consume and understand the structure and the source of your financial data, your ledgers, your chart of account, and other financial relevant information, and then translate it all into a proposed new framework. There are 4 steps in this process. 3 of them are machine led, and only one of them is executed by the humans. Step 1 extracts the data from the source system, both SAP and non SAP, and prepares for the harmonization. Step 2 applies industry best practice principles on the existing data and configuration and prepares for automatic implementation. Step 3 allows for automatic implementation of this model to set up a working central finance system over a weekend with real data. Step 4 allows business and project team users to analyze the result of central finance implementation and refine the data and process model. The refinements suggested could be quickly implemented by dropping the existing system and restarting the full cycle again iteratively. The 4 step process allows the machine to do the heavy lifting, reducing the cost and effort involved in the process. Kinetic Finance Startup is an implementation approach to accelerate S4 and central finance transformation and ultimately drives quicker velocity to value. With Kinetic Finance Startup, organizations can go live with a new SAP S4HANA Central Finance environment in as little as 6 months, thanks to the heavy lifting done by the machine. Compare that to a 10 to 12 months of traditional central finance implementation, the value is evident. Kinetic Finance Startup is already helping many organizations take an important finance transformation step with confidence, with speed, and with the same amount of value that you would expect to see in a traditional transformation. In a typical central finance project, Kinetic Finance Startup allows addressing key harmonization topics upfront by leveraging industry best practice solution approach and defining target data and configuration model. This includes setting up a central finance system with real data already in the month one of the project, allowing for detailed analysis of the configuration, process, and master data challenges. Let me take you through examples of big rocks that Kinetic Finance addresses as part of the implementation. First is process harmonization. As we connect central finance to all source system, configuration objects like document type are extracted and harmonized to reduce the number of configuration finally required in the target system. The optimization of the configuration leads to implementing a clean ERP with least deviation from SAP and industry standards, reducing the unrewarded complexity. Business users can execute end-to-end process steps in SAP Central Finance and take decisions on the process model with agility. In the case of one of the client, we were able to demonstrate the end-to-end process flow in month one of the project and use it in the workshops. Second is financial master data. Finance master data is a critical element of central finance transformation and requires extensive harmonization as a prerequisite. Kinetic Finance Startup allows detailed view of harmonization at an attribute level, allowing cleansing and deduplication early on. At one client where we implemented this approach, we have been able to reduce the number of duplicate GL accounts from 70,000 to less than 5,000 in the first iteration itself. Another key benefit is on transactional data cleansing. Running Kinetic Finance Startup allows to have a view of historical open items, for instance, that can pollute master data in the target system and should be cleansed upfront. There are more such examples where Kinetic Finance Startup can provide the data cleansing input upfront. At one client where we implemented Kinetic approach, we were able to run the initial transaction load in month one of the project, weeding out all unforeseen errors upfront and factoring them in the overall target data and process model design. Overall, with Kinetic approach, customers are able to deliver new business value with a modernized finance function supported by SAP Central Finance much quickly while reducing the effort from finance and IT teams. I would like to conclude by leaving you with a few key broader considerations that you should keep in mind before starting the central finance journey. First, articulating a clear vision and roadmap regarding the central finance journey is absolutely critical. For example, you need to be clear whether central finance is going to be used as a system of reporting and a system of record upfront. Because if you use central finance as a system of record, there are interdependencies with the data that you replicate, subledgers, tax codes, etc. This needs to be thought through right from the very beginning. As we already discussed, aligning master data may be challenging but critical to a successful implementation. Central Finance provides the opportunity to bring the data together, define a common information model across multiple ERPs, SAP or non-SAP. This enables the business to have a holistic view across various processes and functions, not only finance and management accounting, but also across tax, treasury, and other enabling functions. Central Finance offers process benefits. It is not a data warehouse layer. It is important to plan the roadmap and release journey so that there is a continuous tangible value generation to the business throughout this journey. We heard Paul mentioning the continuous value generation. This is key to drive an agile implementation that provides you an early base for innovating around the digital core. Finally, Underpinning this entire journey is involvement and buy-in of the teams, the business, and the users. Visible executive leadership will help navigate various roadblocks and maintain momentum throughout the project. It is critical to have dedicated change management and communications to support this change and garner full commitment to realizing the business case and objective that you set out to achieve as part of central finance transformation. With this, I would now hand over the word back to Christian. Thank you.
So thank you so much for that, Ritesh, and thank you as well, Paul. It was really interesting for you to share your insights on how central finance can change the journey to finance transformation with S4HANA. I've got a couple of questions here, and it'd be good if we could answer some of those. We've still got a couple of minutes left. So this first one, if I could send it to you, Paul. It says here you showed the project Gantt chart looking at the same project with the same endpoint, so presumably still the same task. So can you explain how it can be faster using the central finance approach rather than the Big Bang? We're still doing the same thing, right?
Absolutely. No, you're fully correct there, Chrissy. So the end state of both journeys, whether it's the sequential Big Bang or whether it's the central finance deployment approach, the end state is still that you get a full S/4HANA ERP system and you've decommissioned your legacy ERPs. Right. Now, the thing with the sequential Big Bang approach, and one of the reasons why it takes so long, is effectively, in this case, we had 5 different systems that we're replacing. Each time, you've got to replace the individual business processes. So take something like treasury, for example. So in the first year for division 1, you would do your treasury and you'd slot that in. And then in year 2, you'd also do your treasury for division 2, and in year 3 for division 3, and so on. So you're effectively doing your treasury 5 times with 5 separate implementations, and probably with 5 different teams of people, teams of end users that you're bringing on board. The beauty of central finance, because you've initially started off by bringing all the data into one place from the legacy systems, you can just do your treasury, in this example, transformation once. You do it with bringing all of the teams on board, but it's all in one central place. Now, you can still do it by division. You can take one team on first, but then you immediately roll it out to the second team and the third team and the fourth team. I suppose you did your treasury in your shared service center, for example. Yeah, and so that's one of the reasons why you've got this synergy for just doing the whole project significantly faster.
Brilliant. So I get it now. So it's almost like economies of scale, bringing it together and getting it all done at one time. Excellent. There's another question here, Ritesh. You referred to having a real system, not a theoretical system. And I'm not quite sure that that's understood. Would you be able to let us understand a bit more what that means?
Absolutely. Typically in an implementation project, right, you start with a phase of design, and traditionally it has been done based on theoretical principles. But with kinetic finance approach, our advice and our experience with clients is that when you talk with a real system which is built up with your own data and your own processes, the conversation is much more effective, and the business users and the workshop participants have a better view of what decisions they are making, right? So from that perspective, it's really a game changer because it creates a vision of the end state already in the month 1 of the project, and that is far more effective than having conceptual and theoretical conversation about what your data model should be or what your target process design should be. And the other part, which is also important, is that this also sets the first baseline that gives you that 50% implementation done in the month 1 of a project. And then from there on, it's actually refinement that you need to focus on and not defining the baseline again. So that's where, using this as a real system with your real data is a completely transformational experience compared to traditional workshops based on conceptual design.
Yeah, I think I get it now. And it's about experience, isn't it? So you can really feel what it's like, see what it's like. Yeah, that's really good. Another question that's here is central finance appropriate if I haven't got just an SAP landscape? So I don't know which one of you two would like to address that. I mean, Paul, I saw in your example there, it wasn't just SAP. Do you have an opinion on whether central finance is effective?
Yeah, sure. I'll pick that up and then hand over to Ritesh to build on what I'm about to say. So absolutely. So S/4HANA Central Finance can work with there need be no SAP in the landscape at all to start off with. It could be purely non-SAP, or you could have a mixture, or even just SAP. But let's consider come back to your question where you're saying, well, what about the non-SAP? Now, first of all, when you put all the data into S/4HANA, then everything is SAP. So you're building all of your business processes. You've got all of your inbuilt reporting directly from SAP. But you're reaching out and you're actually getting the data. And in that way, we're actually leveraging expertise from partners such as Deloitte, because they do understand the other systems. The other third-party systems, the non-SAP systems, they understand how to get the data and how to map that onto the SAP. So with that, I'll just hand over to Ritesh to build on that answer.
No, I think, and Paul, you touched the right context there. Coming back to the question, as implementation partners of central finance, we see that central finance is most effective in a landscape where you have multiple source systems of different nature. That's basically the state of affairs for almost all the large clients and clients who go down this journey of central finance. And the biggest advantage of implementing central finance on such a federated landscape of diverse system is to bring data onto the same granularity centrally, right? And based on our experience of large implementations, it is something that we've seen central finance is capable of leveraging and doing and connecting to the source systems equally, without basically a challenge around the source system being SAP or non-SAP. So that's really the advantage of central finance, and creates the right foundation to build up the use cases on top of such a common data layer.
Okay. I think we've got time for one last question. And it's here, it says, I have an industry solution which I can't, or I need to keep running. Is central finance still something that I could use? So I guess what they're saying is they're going to have a system that's still going to be there. Is central finance still appropriate?
Yeah, maybe I could take that question. Central finance, sits next to or continues to exist next to your source system, right? That's the entire value proposition of central finance. It's a symbiotic platform which is basically connected to your source systems. As you bring finance first in the journey of S4 transformation, central finance, allows you to integrate to these source systems, with the industry-specific solutions in some cases, in a real-time basis, right? And sets up that common data platform that can be used for the system of report and system of record, right? So the short answer to your question is yes, it can connect and can leverage the benefit of the industry-specific solutions you have in your source. However, it is important to take that into account when you're defining the common information model, that you have significant and sufficient consideration of the industry-specific data attributes that you would need for your reporting, management reporting, and financial reporting on a central finance platform.
Okay, well, we're pretty much at the end there. So if I could just say again, thank you so much. It's been really interesting to hear your viewpoint. Thank you for all attending. I'll end with all of our contact details on the slide. So if any of you want to get in touch, or if you've got any further questions, please feel free to do so. I look forward to you joining our webinar again next week, and see you again soon. Thank you and bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.